All right, if your water dispenser stops working, if you press that and there's no water coming out, and you may even have water on the floor or certainly at the bottom of the fridge side of your fridge, I'm going to show you how to fix it or how I fixed mine and for super cheap. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here's what's going on. We've got a water dispenser that won't work. Instead, I'm hearing a hissing noise, and when I open the fridge side of my side-by-side fridge, I am definitely hearing and seeing a leak. Did you know that behind, mounted to the fridge wall back there, is something called a reservoir, a water tank, basically. And check this out. It is not happy. I'm going to show you how to take this thing out, and certainly you can replace it with a brand new one. I'll put a link down below, but I'm going to show you some different options as well. We'll start with basically getting this reservoir tank out of the back of the fridge and how to actually locate the leak. I'll do a DIY test so you can see maybe where it's most commonly likely to leak, and then some DIY repair options for you. And then we'll put it all back together again, whether you decide to do a new one, put the new one in or the fixed old one. So pull up a chair and get the popcorn out. This is kind of a long video, and hopefully it'll be worth your time here because this is something that I was not expecting, a random leak. I didn't even know this thing existed, this tank mounted to the back of the fridge. It happened, it kind of hit, midweek randomly, and I ended up spending a lot of time trying to figure out a cheap way to repair this. You can see me pulling out the fridge here as the first step and shutting the water line off. I've got a quarter turn valve here, and that should shut off the water supply to the fridge. And I'll talk about why I did some DIY options later in the video, what my rationale was. But this is the water line coming into the fridge. There's the water filter, and obviously the leak's not coming from there. But this is kind of, if you go down a little further, that tank you can see at the bottom here. So with the water shut off, the water dispenser, when you press it, no longer feeds water through the system, and so the leak is basically contained. So hopefully not too much damage was done. If you're watching this video, maybe you've noticed some water, and obviously you want to get that cleaned up with a towel. So we're going to take out the shelves here. There is a piece of glass in one of those shelves that does remove, so be careful with that. You don't want it to turn it and then it pops out on you. The glass is not adhered to the plastic part. We're going to unplug the fridge as well because we are going to be getting down and dirty with this thing and getting kind of close to some electrical components. So we are shutting off the electricity for sure. Keep in mind, I'm not a plumber, not an electrician. I am just a DIYer, and this video I wanted to put out there because like I said, I put a lot of hours and time into it, and I think I've got something to help you out here. So as you're watching the video, don't forget to click like, share with somebody, and subscribe to the channel if you're just joining me. I do a lot of DIY home projects around the house and put out some product reviews on occasion if they're worth buying. So welcome. So you can see here opening up both doors, and I'm removing this piece. It's really simple. There are two screws, one on each side, and you can use an electric screwdriver to back those out, and we'll be using a regular screwdriver to put those back in so we don't crack any plastic. Vacuum everything off because I bet things are pretty dirty, but right here you can see that water line. There's a blue coupler piece, so we've got a really long tube that kind of shoots off underneath the fridge, and it kind of goes, I'll show you where that comes out. If we open up the fridge door here, that will come into the inside of the fridge right here. There's two tubes, and the long one will be the one on the left. So this is important because to take the water tank out, we need to understand what's going on here. So we're going to vacuum that off, and let me show you around this part. So we've got the tank itself that's going to be adhered to the back of the fridge in two locations. We've also got some plastic protective covering and a piece of styrofoam, and it kind of it's confusing how you get everything out. But you can either lift this piece up and kind of unscrew, or you can take that piece out first. There's like I'll show you in a second a better view. The piece that I'm kind of pushing up at the top there, it's a little plastic covering to cover the light bulb back there, and that piece does come out. This was my first attempt, so I was like, how do you exactly do this? And that piece is pretty flexible. It's not going to bend or break or anything, and I'll show you how to remove that top piece, like I said. But for now, we can back out the screw that's visible. We'll need to be and keep those in a safe place. But here's that plastic piece, and it just pops out. You can see. Let me show you the back side of it here. See those grooves? They just sit atop two pre-mounted screws in the back of the fridge. So you don't need to actually unscrew those. They just it just kind of slides on and off. So that hopefully will help you out. The light, I'm going to loosen up the light fixture just a little bit to get this other white plastic piece out. And again, I unscrewed those two before I took out that light cover that you saw. Feel free to rewind the video if you wanted to see how I did that. But so we've removed two plastic pieces, and we'll go ahead and take out the styrofoam piece that's covering the water tank. And then finally, we'll take out the second screw right there. It's got a little white ring around it that will allow the water tank to be removed from the wall. So next we're going to go around to the back of the fridge, and in this particular model I've got my ratchet set, and I've got 6 screws that need to be undone in order to remove the little panel here. This is just a little cardboard panel, and notice the dust flying around. So while I'm at it, before I do anything, I'm going to vacuum some of this stuff off, including the condenser. Let's take a look here. I'm on the left side behind the fridge, and you can see a water line coming in to what appears to be an electrical unit. Everything's kind of squished together here, so let me try to find I'm pointing at it. That clear water line needs to be removed. Now we have the power off, remember. We could unscrew things, but I'm going to wiggle my fingers through here and I'm going to show you. But this is where that small tube that I just pointed at will come into the inside of your fridge. Remember earlier I showed you where that long tube was coming inside your fridge. This is the other tube. So it's a shorter one, and it needs to be undone. Remember, we have the water turned off now. So let me put the camera down, and I'm going to wiggle my hands back here. And forgive me because the view is blocked a little bit. I'll give you a better view of how this piece works. But have a towel here. The tube will have water in it still. And it shouldn't be, if you keep it up like that, it should squirt out a little bit, but then mostly be contained. But have a towel there and be careful not to get any electrical components wet. So that tube basically just popped out of this little blue coupler thing. Again, I'll show you a better view because we have to do the same thing around the front side in a second. So you'll understand how that works. So we have that dangling now. Can you see that? And again, that's the short tube that goes up inside the fridge. Now the long tube, let's go around to the front of the fridge, below the freezer, and this is what the anatomy of that piece looks like. So check out how I undo it. So with one hand, I'm going to hold the coupler, and my other hand, I'm going to just pop it out, just like that. Take note of the clear water line. By the way, it's filled with water, so have a towel there. You will see a black mark, and I'll explain this again when we go to put everything back together, because you're going to have to put this back in, and you want to make sure you have the correct depth to make sure that it's hooked up correctly. Here's another view of the coupler piece, and there's the line that we just took out. So with that done, we can start to push this long tube through, and then we'll open the door to the fridge, and you can see we're going to just feed those lines, kind of pull them all the way. The one on the right is the shorter tube, and then on the one on the left is the long tube that we most recently attached. You can see it being fed through there. And by the way, if you see any stickers, look at that. It's going to pull the grommets out with it. if you have any stickers or anything attached to the water line. So if you see any stickers, you might want to try to get those off first. Otherwise, your grommets are going to come out with them, and it's not a big problem. By the way, that reservoir is filled with water, so when you start messing around with these water lines, taking them out, check it out. It holds a surprising amount of water, so definitely be prepared to have a couple towels ready, or just hold it up like this. I'm doing this with one hand here. So we're going to slide that grommet piece off, and we're going to pop that back in. I don't see a disadvantage to sealing that up with some 100% silicone if you don't want those to come out ever again. Anyway, so we've got the old one out now. Congratulations, this is what the old one looks like. We're going to clean up the water spillage a little bit. And we've got some droplets here. Notice the bottom shelf is still in. You can certainly take that out if you want to. You might have water to clean up under there. So this is the new one, and if you're going to be installing just a new one, that's all you're interested in, you can fast forward in this video to find where I start putting this back together. But one of the reasons I made this video is to DIY repair this, because the new ones, unfortunately, if you read the reviews, a lot of people are happy with them. A lot of people have the same issue of it leaking after, like, I don't know, a month or 6 months or something like that. So I wanted to investigate a DIY fix. So we're moving on to the test stage now. I'm going to figure out exactly where that leak was. I had a pretty good idea because I got the camera back there. You saw at the very beginning of the video, that leak was high and strong. So I found a cork top for a bottle of wine, and my old beer making kit, I had this converter that allows me to connect a tube, something like this, to the faucet in the bathroom. And so I'm going to try to replicate this line now. I'm not even going to come close to how much pressure is actually coming through here once it's hooked up to my refrigerator. But nonetheless, I'm going to run through water through here, and I should be able to pinpoint with a high degree of accuracy the exact location of the leak. And you can see it right there on the right-hand side. It's positioned just like it was in the fridge. Let me get a better look here. Turn the flash on for you, or the light. And you're going to see the water coming out at that seam right there. And I don't know if these water tanks, if that's typically where they leak. I suspect so, because when you look at the piece, it looks like two pieces of plastic were actually fused together. So, and this thing's about 6 or 7 years old. So over time, that pressure, I guess, builds up, and there's a weak spot that develops, and it creates a leak. So with the leak identified, I'm next going to do a light sanding over the area, because I'm going to be DIY fixing this and attempting and giving you some different options here. Now I'm going to sand it out, put some degreaser on it or some Dawn soap, and wash everything really well, because I don't want I want adhesion to occur as best possible. You'll see my DIY fixes involve some patching of various types. So I'm basically cleaning that up to make sure no finger residue, grease, and things like that are left on it. Now you might be thinking, could I put on 100% silicone? So I'm going to do a little test sample here for you. With a screwdriver, just put on some 100% silicone. I've also got some exterior kind of gutter guard adhesive that kind of is like silicone, but it's white, and it's made to obviously stop water for gutters. So I've got that, and I'm looking for something to adhere really well to plastic and also hold up with the pressure involved. And then I've got this exterior sealant glue. It's kind of like exterior or super glue, but it's exterior and waterproof, and kind of at the end of the bottle here. But let me get some wet stuff here and put on there. So I've got kind of 3 samples. Again, this plastic has been sanded down, so the oxidized part of the plastic has been removed, and in theory this should have the best type of adhesion once it's clean and dry. So I'm going to let that dry overnight, and then I'm going to come back, and the 100% silicone, not super happy with. It's pretty rubbery. I don't think it's going to adhere or certainly stop that. The gutter guard white adhesion was stickier. The best adhesion was this exterior kind of glue, but it's still just kind of peeled off, and my impression was, hey, I don't think this is going to hold. So we're going to step it up a notch, and I've got this stuff next. It's called Plastic Weld, and we're going to see how that does it. Now, if you've got experience with Plastic Weld, You might have, some opinions here or have a better idea of how, to do this. But basically, it's a putty-like thing. If you've mixed epoxy, 2 parts, it's kind of preformed. It's this clay stuff that you get out and you roll it around, and I guess it creates a chemical reaction. And then once that it has been combined and mixed together, it's going to turn a certain color, so grayish, and then you're on a timer at that point. It'll give you 15 minutes of pliability or something like that. You'll have to read the instructions. Again, links below in the description for everything that you'll see that I'm using in this video. And so I'm going to put this on, and I'm going to basically patch that hole and see how it holds up once it's good and cured. So you'll get a sense for, is this a good idea? Could I do something better? It would be a starting point for you for sure. So we've got it on there, and it is drying. And I let this dry for a good 24 hours before I came back and messed with it. I didn't even really move it besides what you saw there. So we'll put the cap back on, and we're kind of done with the plastic weld for now. So coming back to it, it's pretty, like the name implies, plastic weld. It allows you to weld plastic, right? The big question is, will it adhere? Is it durable? And will it stop pressure over the long term? So here I am scraping it, and it is very rock-like almost. I was really impressed by the durability of it. So we're going to go ahead, and this will be our first test sample, and we will get it hooked back up, the reservoir back up to the back of the fridge, and we'll turn on the water. Now remember, I've put those tubes back into place. You can't just turn on the water and call it good. You've got to plug everything back in. At the end of the video, I'll show you exactly how to do that. But for now, I'm just skipping that part, and we're just focusing on the testing of the patch. So when you have the water back on, you can hear the reservoir filling up before water comes into your glass. So water's going to come into the fridge from your wall, from your house. It'll fill up the reservoir. You can see it rising there. And then it shoots out. So if you've got water, that means that the plug is filled, right? There's no leak. If you've got a leak, the water in the dispenser will stop working. So we've got, right off the bat, it looks like we are good and dry. You feel that? No leaks anywhere else. So we are dealing with one isolated leak or hole or split or whatever we want to call it. So that's good news. Glass 2. We are dry. The question is, how long will this hold back up? So you can see I've fast forwarded here. I've got the shelves back in. This is several days later, and everything seems to be working well until I got a call at work, and my wife said it stopped working again. So I got home. The patch did not hold. So unless you have more experience with plastic weld, this would be probably not your best option. So let's take it up a notch. So I've got a variety of plastics here. My next line of thought went to, okay, can I adhere some type of similar plastic? So I bought this kit, and I tried to identify the same amount or the same type of plastic that the water tank is adhered to, or the water tank is made of. Because if you adhere two different types of plastic, or try to, they might not bond, right? So that's kind of what I was thinking next. So I came up with this. This is the closest one. It actually said water tanks are made of this, and they color matched as well. So I assume that was a pretty close match. Now I'm going to do a little test sample here, and I've got this little stapler, and this is just me and my test sample to see if heat will work up. We'll create a bond here. Don't use a stapler, a hot stapler gun. If you've used one of those for this, you don't want to put that staple through the tank. That would be a problem. You can see we've got some adhesion happening. Seems to be okay. Of course, if you pick at it, not the best, right? Alright, so here's what I'm doing next. I'm going to abandon those strips, and I'm going to cut off a little bit of the clip. I ended up cutting off the wrong clip. There's actually three, one on both sides and then one on the top. But that's okay. I still got the screw to hold. But I'm going to take a little bit of the same plastic, because that's obviously the same type of plastic, right? If it's on the clip that's on there. And I've got my little soldering iron here. And these you can pick up for like $10. They've got a really narrow tip. There's 3 different tips on this one that you can change out. I've got my widest one here, and we're going to get that little piece of plastic, and we're going to start to try to burn that. You know, like if you take a candle flame to the end of a frayed belt or something, it kind of singes, right? So I'm going after heat here, and I'm trying to melt that plastic to plug the hole. And I have to be real careful, because I don't want to create a bigger problem and accidentally burn a hole right through it, right? So very carefully, I'm taking that piece of plastic that I just undid or clipped off from the clip, and I'm going to be melting that. Got to wait for it to reach maximum temperature. And it's a bit awkward because it wants to kind of like slide off, right? Not a great working space, but whatever. I'm making it happen here. So I'm slowly starting to reach maximum temperature and fusing this piece of excess plastic into and over the leak. What do you think? Predictions? Will this hold or will it not? So the dark color here is a mixture between probably a little bit of dirt, because I was working on my garage floor, and the burning of the plastic as it gets up to temperature. All right, so with that in place, we're going to hook everything back up. I told you I put a lot of hours into this. I'm about done with this project. But it was so fun. I actually learned quite a bit. It was stressful, but I just tried to go with it. It is what it is. So I've got this hooked back up. It's mounted to the back of the fridge again. And let's go ahead and test it out. Remember, the reservoir will fill up before it starts to put water into your cup. And we're looking good so far. I don't hear anything. Again, that water is moving, so the hole is plugged, at least for the moment, right? The question is, for how long? 2 glasses of water is nothing. That's not a test. You need to test it, I'd say a few weeks before you call it good and are able to walk away from it. So it was about 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later. Look, we've got food and everything in there. We're still going strong. And if you are going to DIY and test it, you want to be able to reach it. But look at that. 2 weeks later, it pops. So that's no good. Okay. So we're stepping it up a notch. We're going even further. I've got this thing. It's specifically a plastic welding tool. You can see it's got kind of an arrowhead tip to it. And it is specifically designed for like flat surfaces like this. And it gets super hot as well. And in this little test sample, I am just molding, and it's got extra mold that comes with it. So it's designed for, smearing it, basically connecting 2 pieces of broken plastic together. So that's what I'm doing with this little plastic hamper. And obviously it's a different color. I'm not after aesthetics here. I'm just looking to see how this works, and how will it hold up, right? 2 pieces of plastic like this at 900 degrees or whatever temperature this thing gets to. So it's a little messy, but at the end of my little test strip here, it's durable. I mean, it fixed it. Look at that. So I'm going to apply that and see if that can fix here. So it's got a little wider base to it. You can, as I mentioned before, a little arrowhead tip, which I like. The soldering iron tip was a little too thin and narrow. It was like working with a needle point. This one definitely has that surface area that I was after. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the little test. So again, this kit comes with this like plastic stuff, and the idea is that you obviously get it to temperature and then slowly start to work it into the plastic. Now I don't just want to like patch it. I want to actually fuse this black plastic into the white plastic from the reservoir, right? I want to burn it together so that it creates a permanent, once it cools, it creates a permanent seal. That hole, that split, that gap or leak is no longer there. So unlike the plastic weld stuff that I did before, where it's just like you cover it, I want to burn it, but I can't burn it all the way through, obviously. So I'm slowly kind of working this black plastic into it and moving it around, going a little deep, but not too deep where it penetrates the thickness of the tank itself. And you can see lots of plastic smoke coming up. This is not good to breathe. Do this in a ventilated area and wear a mask, because it'll get pretty nasty. And you've got to make sure it's up to temperature, otherwise it's not going to purely or fully melt. You want it to be liquid-like and smooth. There's a better shot. And here we are. We are dry now, and it just takes a couple of minutes for it to dry, but I'm going to just let it sit for a good 12 hours. I just want it to dry. It's so overkill, but here we are. Have it hooked up again, and we are dry and good to go, and it's been 3 or 4 weeks from the making of this video, so I'm going to call this a fix. Now, you could get the new one out. On this point of the video, I'm going to show you how to install it. So whether you're doing a new one or the old one, how do you get this thing back in? In my testing earlier, I didn't describe that intentionally, right? Because I was just focusing on the testing. But we're going to slide the short tube through the right-hand grommet, and then the long tube will go through the left-hand grommet. Now, you're going to put this little styrofoam insulator thing on the two tubes before you do that. Or you could put both tubes in the grommet holes, and then to make it a little easier for you, you could take a razor blade and slice one side of the insulation. You'll lose a little insulation, but it makes installation of the styrofoam along those two tubes a little easier. So in other words, you can mount this first, and then get the styrofoam around the two tubes on the right-hand side. Otherwise, you're going to have to fish those through first before you mount this. So we're going to start at the top. We've got that screw with the little white washer on it that goes onto the top, and then the one on the left here. And you can go ahead and use a screwdriver and get those snug. And this is what I was talking about. So you can fish those long tubes through first if you want to, have that styrofoam piece on. Otherwise, cut it. It'll be a little easier. And then the short tube will come down that right-hand side and kind of go, we're just going to reverse the process, right? So it's got to come down enough, and then you'll kind of bend it upward a little bit, being careful not to kink anything, obviously. And then you'll lose a little vision here, but I am reversing that process. So I'm pushing that tube all the way into the blue coupler. And if you look at the end of your clear water tube, there should be a black mark on there. You want to sink it all the way in. You shouldn't really see any of that black mark. That's what it's there for. I'll show you what that looks like again on the front side, a more clear shot for you. But for now, let's go ahead and get this other piece back in. Now, before you tighten down the light, because you might need that to have a little wiggle room to get your styrofoam back on and the other plastic piece. Well, here's what I was talking about with that styrofoam. See, I split it with that razor blade, and that allows you to, let me get that in there. There we go. That allows you to, put that on Otherwise, it's kind of you're kind of wrestling with it. But anyway, this is the styrofoam piece that should fit back right on top of the tank itself. And again, that light you might need to remove so that you can have clear access to that. And it should sit just like that. And it won't cover the leak. I can still feel if there's water coming down there, no problem. And certainly I'll see it, and my water dispenser will stop working. Next, we're going to fish that long tube back up to the front of the fridge. And you saw that goes back through the left-hand side grommet, right, inside the fridge. And here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to connect this piece again, and it has to be connected from behind that metal part of the fridge. And we're going to sink that water line all the way into the blue coupler. Again, if you go down and check, or wherever you're at right now, check the end of your water line, that you should see a black, kind of like a Sharpie marker like that. That's how the manufacturer did it. It's like an inch or an inch and a half, maybe. I don't know. Whatever it is. And you want to sink that all the way in. No tools needed. Just clip it by hand. And it is a watertight seal, although obviously you'll want to check for leaks and call a plumber if you're not comfortable with doing any of that work. Okay, so next, to put this back together on top of the styrofoam insulative piece that we just put on, goes the little plastic, whatever this is called. And there's two little screws that kind of pop in. They're more like push screws. And then we'll secure the light. And then we'll put the light cover back on. If you remember earlier in the video I showed you, it just kind of snaps down onto two screws that are pre-mounted. And that's pretty much it there. We'll turn the water back on. Check for leaks. I had a leak at the base of the quarter turn valve, and so I had to replace this piece of the line. It was super easy to do. I'll make another video at some point on how to do that, and I am checking for leaks after I turn the water on. We are dry and good. And obviously you'll want to actually run the water dispenser as water cycles through there, and then check for leaks. And check. I was like checking every time, for a day or two, just to make sure we were good at all junctions. We are dry. And of course, don't forget to check down here too to make sure you got that tube pushed all the way in. Again, you should see no black Sharpie marker on it. It should be sunk all the way in. And last but not least, we will put the shelves back on, starting with this one. Again, there's glass in one of them, so be careful. Take the glass out if you need to. And they just slide in like that. You might have to wiggle them a little bit. This piece has a couple of, this is the one that holds the glass, a couple of places for it to sit on, so make sure that's inserted correctly. And there's that glass I was talking about. And it just sits like that, nice and smooth. Pretty easy. And then there's the bottom shelf. And if you're testing it and monitoring it, make sure you don't block view and access to that, right? Because that's where the water will come down. That's where the leak will be. You'll hear it. You should be able to see it. And I'm going to be monitoring this for days and days and days and days, if not weeks and weeks and weeks. Of course, you could just buy a new one and take your chances. Maybe your new one will last you 6 years. Maybe not. But I'm a control freak DIYer, and I'm going the DIY route. And it saved me a little bit of money. I had to buy some different tools for my testing, but it should, if you've got one of those like plastic welder tools or a soldering iron, you might have a little more success than I did. But it should cost you between 10 and 20 bucks ish, as opposed to a new water filter, which was, I don't know, 40 bucks, 45 bucks, 50 bucks, something like that. So that's a savings to me. And we're going to put this little toe kick piece back on. If you remember earlier, we had to take that off. Don't pinch that water line, and then secure them as you just saw with those two screws. And remove my tape. Get away from the water dispenser. Don't use it. Tape. And then don't forget to cover the back of the fridge up. And I'm popping around a little bit from video to video on this. Like I said, I took a lot of footage and spent a lot of time with this. So. But moral of the story here, we are dry and we are secure. I am calling this a successful DIY project. Thank you for being with me. I hope your popcorn is all done. I'm sure it is. This was a long one, but hopefully giving you some ideas on at least where your leak may be, right? Can you DIY fix it yourself, or should I buy a new one? How hard, how easy is it? And thanks for being with me.